Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we're going to talk a little bit more about being the world's EMT, or the Department of something else, the Department of Peace, whatever you want to call it. Anytime this concept comes up, and the idea of a doctrinal shift from using the military to using something else to nation build, to help countries that aren't doing so well or nations that have failed. One of the first questions that always pops up is, does that mean that DOD is going to get its budget cut? And the answer to that is probably not. Probably not. That stat gets thrown out all the time. The United States spends more on defense than the next X number of countries combined. That's intentional. That's doctrine. Current doctrine says the United States needs to be capable of fighting its next two largest competitors. The United States needs to be able to fight China and Russia at the same time and at least fight them to a stalemate. That's why we spend so much money on it. I've said this before, and when I said it, the comments reflected that people thought I was joking. The largest air force in the world is the United States Air Force. The second largest air force in the world is the United States Navy. No joke. Now, that seems incredibly wasteful, and it is. It is. At the same time, this doctrine was adopted after World War II because we had to fight the Germans and the Japanese at the same time. And we're like, wow, this is really hard. We need to be prepared for it, right? So that's how it came about. I would point out there has not been a great power war since this doctrine was adopted. Large countries, they don't go to war anymore. This is a case of peace through superior firepower. That's the idea, that's the doctrine. And thus far, it's kind of worked for that purpose. The problem is people in the United States want to justify it beyond this doctrine because nobody explains the policy. So, well, we're not going to buy you more missiles until you use the ones you have. And next thing you know, we're fighting in a bunch of small conflicts constantly. And that leads us directly to the issue at hand. When the United States goes into a country, it wins. Conventionally, the United States wins almost immediately. Always. Here's where we're going to divide conventional and unconventional. When you're picturing conventional warfare, that's World War II. Lines, territory taken and lost. Okay? There is not a country on the planet that can even come remotely close to competing with the United States in that type of warfare. There's not. Realistically, there's probably not two countries that could compete. The United States excels at that. And that's part of the problem. The first part of the issue comes in when the United States just obliterates an opposition military too quickly. No joke. It's what happened in Iraq. So when it collapses, then you have all of the little groups that spring up. And then that second phase of fighting begins. The unconventional side. The United States doesn't do so well with that. No large power does. The other part to this that's an issue is that most countries on our, quote, bad guy list, they know this. If you look at the doctrines of Iran or North Korea on how they plan to deal with a U.S. attack, it's basically fight for like 3 days and then disappear into the hills and go ahead and start that second phase, that unconventional phase. that leads to the need for that second force because the skills are different. So that's where the world's EMT comes in, or the Department of something else. If you're looking at it from Thomas Barnett's point of view, this is when it would show up. Now, something I would point out is that I've never seen Barnett talk about using that second force independently of the first, which is totally something we could do. We don't actually have to have the war to use that second entity, that second agency. That's how Marianne Williamson pictured using it, showing up in countries and just helping, because war is bad. Realistically, it would work both ways. There would be times when it would be used without war. There would be times when it would be used as a follow-on force to help avoid that second phase of warfare, which is when the United States loses. So, if a track record of success was established using this world's EMT force, eventually what would occur is countries that were in peril, countries where the government was shaky, the people would ask for the force. They would ask to get assistance, and it wouldn't take a conflict. Just like the large military deters a great power war, this second entity, Department of Peace, Department of something else, World's EMT, it would deter that second phase of warfare. If we did it right, and this was a transparent international effort, it could avoid the conflict entirely. Because it could be, hey, we'll come in and help. And doing it without conflict is better. From a standpoint of the person on the ground in this country, that's obviously the better move. And we'll get into the different ideological motivations for why people support this idea, and they're varied. But at the end of the day, what really matters are the people on the ground in the country that becomes the battle space, that becomes the operational area. So realistically, no, DOD would not shrink. It might lose a little bit of its budget, but more than likely what would happen is it just wouldn't grow for a few years. And that budget would be diverted to this other entity. At some point, the United States is going to have to reckon with its massive defense expenditures. This doctrine, it made sense. It really did. It made sense after World War II. It made sense throughout the Cold War. It doesn't make sense today. The odds of having to go toe-to-toe with Russia and China at the same time is pretty slim, especially considering the major competitors are all nuclear powers. We could probably have our DOD budget and still maintain the edge that we have today. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.